The wind crawled through the shattered fields of Virginia like a ghost whispering through the dead. The year was 1865, and America was bleeding out. The rivers ran dark with mud and memory, and every road smelled of gunpowder and decay. Somewhere in that wasteland of exhaustion, two men were locked in a duel of wills, not just generals, but symbols of a nation tearing itself apart. Ulysses S. Grant, the quiet juggernaut of the Union, and Robert E. Lee, the proud knight of the Confederacy. One marched with destiny at his side, the other with a dying cause upon his shoulders. The war was ending, but neither man knew when it would finally let go. The camera drifts across a fog-drenched battlefield, rows of burned wagons, shattered muskets glinting in pale morning light. The sound of distant cannon fire fades into the echo of a heartbeat. A narrator speaks over the void, voice heavy with the weight of centuries. In the final weeks of the Civil War, when men fought with nothing left but ghosts and hunger, Grant set the perfect trap, and Lee, the legend of Virginia, walked straight into it. Low strings rise in the background, a slow, mournful cello. The tone is dark, intimate, almost funereal. We cut to Grant's headquarters at City Point, Virginia. Mud, rain, and chaos. Telegraph lines hum. Dispatch riders come and go like phantoms. Grant stands alone, his uniform stained, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He writes a letter, his pen trembling slightly. He does not gloat nor rage. His war is mechanical, a slow suffocation of the Confederacy inch by inch. Grant was not a romantic general. He didn't chase glory. He crushed resistance with patience and precision. To him, victory wasn't a charge. It was a siege. He understood that the Confederacy didn't need to be destroyed in one grand battle. It only needed to be starved. His plan was simple and brutal: trap Lee's army, cut off their supplies, break their spirit. The rain turns heavier. Soldiers dig trenches in the mud near Petersburg. The camera pans over skeletal faces, bearded and cold, eyes sunken but still defiant. The siege has lasted for months. Men die not from bullets but from rot, hunger, and despair. Lee's army is cornered, but still dangerous, like a wounded animal that refuses to die. The narrator's tone lowers. Every mile Lee retreated, every ration he lost, every hour his men went unfazed. Grant's trap closed tighter. It was not vengeance. It was inevitability. Visual cue. Slow motion shots of Confederate soldiers cooking meager rations over smoky fires, men praying quietly in the mud, letters home clutched in trembling hands. Music, a haunting piano melody underlaid with wind and distant thunder. We cut to Lee, under a grey tent at Amelia Courthouse. His beard white, his eyes sharp yet shadowed by fatigue. Around him, officers whisper reports of lost supply trains. The Confederacy's last hope, food and ammunition promised from Richmond, never arrived. Lee's men open crates expecting bread and bullets, but find nothing but empty boxes. The silence that follows is deafening. Lee's face doesn't move. He simply nods, accepting what he already knew, that the end had come disguised as fate. The narrator's voice darkens. The South was not defeated in one moment. It died slowly, from hunger, from loss, from the weight of its own illusions. We cut to a wide shot. Lee's army on the move, wagons creaking through fields turned to rivers of mud. The camera tilts upward, grey sky, crows circling. Music fades into a single violin. Grant watches from afar, tracking every move. His men advance methodically, cutting off routes, burning bridges, blocking supply roads. Each maneuver is like a hand tightening around a throat. The trap is not yet sprung, but the prey is surrounded. Then silence. The narrator. By April, Lee had nowhere left to go. Every direction was death, yet still he marched, not for victory, but for honor. The screen fades to black. A faint heartbeat echoes. Visual cue text appears faintly in smoke. April 1865, music swells with tension, slow drums, distant horns. The narrator whispers, The end of the war was not a battle. It was a chase through hell. The forests of Virginia burned with twilight as Lee's army stumbled westward. Men walked barefoot, their uniforms in tatters, their bellies empty. Horses collapsed in the mud and were left behind. The roads were littered with broken wagons and broken dreams. Yet through it all, Lee rode tall, calm, silent, and unreadable. To his men, he was more than a general. He was faith made flesh. They followed him not out of hope for victory, but out of devotion. The camera moves through the ragged Confederate column, pale faces lit by campfire embers, hands trembling as they clutch muskets that haven't been fired in days. The faint hum of a hymn drifts through the night air, voices cracked and weary. Nearer, my God, to thee. The narrator's tone turns almost reverent. For Lee's men, this was no longer a war for land or power. It was a pilgrimage through ruin, a final march into history. Cut to Grant's camp, smoke, mud, and murmuring soldiers. Grant studies a map under flickering lamplight. His eyes trace every road Lee might take. Around him, aides whisper suggestions, but Grant doesn't speak. He simply taps one point on the map, Appomattox. A single word escapes his lips. There? The music deepens. Steady percussion like a heartbeat of fate. The narrator continues, Grant did not seek blood. He sought conclusion. He knew every man who died now would die for nothing. The Union columns begin their silent pursuit. Cavalry by night, infantry by dawn. Blue coats stretching over the horizon like a rising tide. Dust clouds shimmer under the morning sun. The camera cuts between the two armies, one fleeing, one closing in. Each frame feels like the ticking of a clock winding down to destiny. Visual cue. A crow circles above a dead field, its shadow passing over Lee's men like an omen. Music, slow drums, cello tremors. Lee receives word at dusk. Union cavalry has blocked the road ahead at Appomattox Station. His supply trains have been captured. Food, ammunition, everything gone. Around him, officers argue. Some beg to fight their way through. Others whisper surrender. Lee listens to the storm of voices, then silences them with a single sentence. We must go on. He knows it's hopeless. But surrender, to him, feels worse than death. The narrator's voice grows heavy with emotion. There is a moment in every war when courage becomes cruelty, not to others, but to oneself. Lee had reached that moment. The night falls. Campfires flicker like dying stars. The camera lingers on faces, boys barely 16, veterans with haunted eyes, a drummer asleep clutching his broken sticks. The wind carries the distant thunder of Union guns. It sounds like the sky is breaking apart. The next morning, April 8th, Lee rides to the crest of a hill. Before him lies Appomattox Courthouse, small, quiet, unassuming. Beyond it, the Union Army waits. Blue lines shimmer in the morning haze, thousands upon thousands. Grant's trap is complete. The narrator whispers, "Here, in this forgotten corner of Virginia, the greatest army the South ever raised met the end of its dream." Cut to Grant again. His uniform mud-stained, his face expressionless. He receives Lee's message requesting a meeting. Grant's hands tremble slightly as he reads. He orders his horse prepared. For the first time in months, he smiles, not in triumph, but in relief. Music softens to piano and strings, the tension replaced by melancholy calm. The narrator, Grant, did not see Lee as an enemy. He saw him as a man caught in the same storm, two soldiers bound by the tragedy of their time. As the camera pans over the endless rows of blue and gray, the music fades to a whisper. The sun breaks through the clouds, lighting the fields with pale gold. And in that fragile light, one war ends, not with cheers, but with silence. The morning of April 9th, 1865, dawned cold and strangely peaceful. Mist hung low over the fields, as if the earth itself hesitated to reveal what was coming. At the edge of Appomattox, in the small home of Wilmer McLean, two men prepared to meet and close the bloodiest chapter in American history. The camera glides through the quiet rooms, the ticking of a clock, the faint sound of soldiers outside, boots crunching on gravel. Inside, a table waits, papers, ink, two chairs. The air feels sacred, heavy with the weight of centuries. The narrator's tone softens. It began in McLean's parlor, a simple house in a quiet town. But in that room, history exhaled. Lee arrives first, immaculately dressed in his best grey uniform, sword polished, posture unbent. His dignity is all he has left. Around him, Union officers stand in silence, not out of triumph but respect. Moments later, Grant enters, rumpled, mud-stained, eyes sunken from sleeplessness. He looks nothing like a conqueror. He looks like a man who has carried too much death on his shoulders. The two men shake hands. The world holds its breath. For a long moment, they simply talk, not of victory or defeat, but of old army days in Mexico, of shared comrades long dead. The war feels distant, almost forgotten. Then Grant clears his throat, his voice calm, deliberate. "General Lee," he says, "the terms are simple. Your men will lay down their arms and return home. They will not be disturbed as long as they keep the peace." Lee nods slowly. There is no anger in his face, only exhaustion, and a quiet gratitude that it ends this way. His voice trembles slightly. "We have fought through the war, sir. We have done all that men could do." The pen scratches across paper. The surrender is signed. Outside, silence spreads like a tide. Union soldiers remove their caps. Confederate soldiers stare at the ground. No cheers, no jeers. Just wind and the soft rustle of flags lowering for the last time. The narrator's voice grows distant, almost poetic. There are endings that roar like thunder, and there are endings that whisper like prayer. This was the latter, a war that began in fury, ended in grace. Visual cue. The camera pans slowly across both armies, the blue and grey blending into one color of dust and weariness. Music. A single violin accompanied by a low piano, the melody fragile and human. Grant steps outside. Reporters ask if he'll celebrate. He shakes his head. "The war is over," he says quietly. "The rebels are our countrymen again." His horse, Cincinnati, stamps the earth softly, as if sensing the weight of those words. Across the fields, Lee rides away, his back straight, his sword untouched at his side. He passes through his men, some crying, some saluting, some staring in silence. A few reach out to touch his horse's flank as he passes, as if to hold on to the last shadow of their cause. The narrator lowers his tone. In that moment, both men became myth. Grant, the relentless hand of Union; Lee, the noble ghost of a fallen world. Their meeting at Appomattox was not just an end, but a mirror, reflecting what America had been and what it might yet become. The music swells, a mixture of sorrow and fragile hope. Visual cue. The scene fades between soldiers returning home, fields growing over with grass, cannons rusting in silence. The camera rises above Virginia, endless forests, rivers, and small towns slowly rebuilding. The narrator whispers that the war did not end here, it only changed its form. The guns fell silent, but the wounds would last 100 years. The screen darkens. A single candle flickers. The voice returns one last time, deep and haunting. Grant trapped Lee. The war's end began, yet in the silence of Appomattox, one question lingered. If brother can turn on brother once, what keeps the peace forever? Music haunting choir tones, fading into stillness. Visual suggestion for closing an aerial shot of Appomattox, fading into modern America. Highways, cities, faces. The same land, the same ghosts. The final line, whispered, "Every war ends, but the echoes never do." If this story moved you, if the silence of Appomattox, the faces of the broken, and the weight of Grant and Lee's final meeting still echo in your mind, then don't let this moment fade. Subscribe to Unsolved History and step with us into the shadows of the past, where truth and myth walk side by side. Like this video if you believe history should be felt, not just told. Share it so others can remember the cost of every peace bought in blood. And in the comments, tell us, do you think America ever truly healed from its civil war? Or do the ghosts of 1865 still haunt us today?